Welcome to IREX. My name is Sheila Scott, and I work here at IREX in the Center for Applied Learning and Impact. And the topic of our discussion today is addressing disinformation in Eurasia. One goal, two approaches. Disinformation has loomed large in U.S. political discourse of late, particularly in connection to the 2016 presidential campaign and the elections. But our friends, family members, and relatives in Eurasia have been dealing with increasing disinformation for at least a decade. Researchers noted a spike in disinformation, for example, in 2004 when the Baltic countries joined NATO, and again in 2014 with the occupation of Crimea. Fair, balanced reporting and access to reliable information are key to a thriving democracy. And that is why our panelists today will be sharing some of their insights and lessons learned from different approaches, which are complementary in building a virtuous cycle that addresses both the supply side issues and demand side issues. In other words, the need for quality, reliable, and relevant content must be matched by discerning consumers with the critical information skills to actually sort quality information from the other noise that is currently there in the information ecosystem. Obviously, the information war is not new. Some examples go back as far as the Trojan horse. But the information habits of consumers and information producers are changing as technology changes apace. And effective approaches, as we'll hear today, need to keep up with those changes in order to maintain their efficacy. IREX, for example, has worked for decades with both information producers and consumers throughout Eurasia. And in fact, we've been firsthand witnesses of how that distinction has actually blurred between consumers and producers. And therefore, we need to take a different approach, what we call the vibrant information approach. We would ask that, if possible, you save your questions until the end. We'll have 20 minutes for questions and answers. But you may also, if you like, during the course of the conversation today, tweet your questions to @BBGGOV. And you can also follow the conversation, whether you join us here in Washington, D.C., or if you're an online viewer, using the hashtags BBGIREX, that's BBGIREX, or hashtag #CounterDisinfo. I'd also like to ask you to please turn off your telephones. And even though the panelist bios were available in the table in the back of the room, I'd like to say a few words about them to kick us off today. To my immediate left is Ms. Daisy Sindelar, who is director of the Broadcasting Board of Governors Current Time Digital Network, a 24/7 Russian language channel. Based in Prague, Ms. Sindelar has been with Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty since February 2001, where she contributed as a senior correspondent and also regional director for RFE's European desk. To her left is Ms. Irina Van Duzen, who has more than 30 years of experience as a mass media journalist. Ms. Van Duzen joined Voice of America's Russian service in 2004 as an international broadcaster. And in 2011, she was selected as service chief responsible for all Russian language programming for Voice of America. Welcome. We also have, I'm not sure how we can see it, we will have joining us from IREX's Kiev office, Lubov Vasilchuk. Lubov is a program manager with IREX Ukraine. She's currently managing Yedina Hromada, which is a U.S. Department of State funded program working on community cohesion in conflict-afflicted regions of eastern Ukraine. In 2015 and 2016, however, Lubov was our program manager for the Learn to Discern Media Literacy program, which built critical information consumption skills through in-person and online training, as well as an information campaign that covered the entire central and eastern portions of Ukraine. So without further ado, I would like to launch our discussion today. We will begin with 5 minutes from each of the panelists to describe their work, and then I will ask some questions, and then we will open it up, as I mentioned previously, to questions from all of you. I believe we'll begin today with Lubov. Do we have Lubov online?
Good afternoon and good morning to you. Speaking about our project, in 2015-2016, IREX implemented Citizen Media Literacy Program, which was also called as Learn to Discern project. It was a 9-month project that helped to equip over 15,000 Ukrainian citizens with media literacy and critical thinking skills. The goal of the project was to enhance citizens' capacity to discern the reliability and information and news, as well as to increase demand for truthful reporting. Therefore, in our project, we looked on the media literacy as an ability to discern the information that comes from different forms and also from different sources. IREX's Learn to Discern learning model is based on several principles, and namely, the developed skills and knowledge gained is received through simple, interesting, and practical materials. And our core principle is that we does not teach people what to watch and read, but how to do so in the era of disinformation. Having skills of verifying sources, debunking news, photos, videos, detecting censorship and manipulations, identifying hate speech, and verifying expert credentials help people to be more confident in what they believe or not, no matter which media or source of information they use. We empowered over 400 trusted interlocutors, teachers, librarians, and grassroots activists who passed our two-day trainings for trainers, and they imparted critical information skills to help citizens sort misinformation and propaganda from the fact-based balanced reporting. In addition to the training component, we also held a small informational campaign which reached over 20 million of citizens who saw the public service announcement broadcast on national TV channels and social media. Through training, we learned to discern provided concrete skills and cross-check facts, and the informational campaign on TV, on billboards, and Kyiv metro stations reinforced the idea that each of us is responsible for the choices we make when consuming information. And what we expose to our minds is also important as what we put into our bodies. The main slogan of our informational campaign was "Information is a product, consume wisely." This is only a 20-second video, so I suggest us to watch it now.
Информация как продукт. Она тоже может быть некачественной, неполной и даже вредной. А какую потребляете вы? Качественную? Или только похожую на нее? Будьте осторожны. Проверяйте информацию. Потребляйте осознанно.
After the campaign, we conducted a national survey to measure the results, how it worked. And what we received is the following. 60% of citizens who saw the video, they confirmed that this video is relevant to them. And over 55% of citizens are interested to following the slogan. And just after watching this short video, but what is more important, through watching this 20-second video, over 54% of respondents told that they need gain knowledge on and skills on how to distinguish truthful information from false. Moreover, over 20% of citizens who watched the video would like to participate in activities to promote more truthful news in media, in person or remotely. Program data indicate positive changes in both attitudes and behavior correlating to more discerning information consumption. While some of the tactics used by creators of disinformation and propaganda have been successfully employed for over a century, changes in information and communication technology and evolving information consumption habits underscore the need for ongoing adaptation of today's media literacy approaches to reflect local needs and skills. Trust and relevance are key to success. Back to you, Sheila.
Thank you, Luba. So this describes IREX's approach, which was very much focused, as we had mentioned before, on the demand part of the virtuous cycle. But obviously, if information consumers have skills and there is no quality and reliable content out there, it would become a frustrating process. And then they would end up no longer searching for news which they couldn't trust. So I would like to turn it over to Daisy now to share about Current Time and how you came to develop it and what sort of programming you have.
Okay, well, thank you very much, and good morning, everyone, and thanks to you, Sheila, and to IREX for having us here today. I think it's going to be an interesting conversation. So Current Time is a pretty new product. It's a 24/7 television and digital network delivering news and information programs to much of the Russian-speaking world. And for those of you who are familiar with the model that Radio Free Europe and VOA are built on, part of our original strategy that we consider quite key is delivering news and information in the vernacular language. So we're broadcasting in Belarus, not in Russian, but in Belarusian. Current Time takes the opposite strategy, and the reason that came about was because of the annexation of Crimea in 2014, where we realized that Russian language media was largely Kremlin dominated and was reaching a lot of vulnerable populations where there were Russian speakers outside of Russia. And we realized that there was an opportunity and in fact a real necessity for us to get into those countries and speak to audiences that were receiving a lot of their media in the Russian language. So we really look at Current Time as an interesting opportunity to provide a real news alternative to people who are being fed a steady diet of Kremlin-controlled television. So we began with a single half-hour news program that was produced jointly between RFE and VOA that was simply called Current Time, Nastoящее время. That was about almost 3 years ago. And it was followed by a second 30-minute news program that was the same. It was a news digest directed towards a Central Asian audience. And from there, starting last year in October, we went 24/7. So it really has been an incredibly quick-growing project. And so we have a nightly news lineup, including news that comes from the United States, which Irina is going to talk to us about. We have documentary programs where we are showing documentaries that are rarely shown inside Russia, like My Friend Boris Nemtsov. And we have a lot of information programs dealing with business, with startups, with travel, with media literacy, which I'm going to talk about in greater detail in a bit. And what we've really seen is that there's a real appetite for this kind of product. So we started small, and now the channel is distributed by 45 different distributors in 14 countries, most recently in Israel, where of course there's a large Russian-speaking population. So the big nut for us to crack is Russia, where we are pretty much barred from traditional distribution. We have some satellite distribution, but not much. And that's a place where we have used our digital strategy as a surrogate for getting into the country, and it's quite effective. So in fact, the first product that I want to show you is something from our digital team, and it's quite a fascinating video that was taken by a student who participated, was one of the many young people who came out in the March 26th anti-corruption protest that was called by Navalny. And this is after the protest has already taken place, and he's being taken to task by his teacher in the classroom. And it's a very interesting argument that he filmed with his phone, and you'll take a look at what ensued.
Ты любишь агрессию? Встал! Быстро встал!
В смысле?
Встал! Ты экстремизм
Что?
любишь! Агрессию!
Нет.
Встал! Встал быстро!
Что сейчас произошло?
Совсем недавно, в марте, на каникулах, как раз, по-моему, это были каникулы, у нас был митинг. Ты чего улыбаешься? Я догадалась, что ты там есть.
Ну и
Я
что?
догадалась, что там есть. А ничего хорошего нет в этом.
А почему?
А вот ты сейчас увидишь, ты просто сейчас увидишь.
А я смотрел.
Тебе нравится просто, когда все вместе? Да?
Что?
Тебе нравится, когда все вместе, когда ты во внимании? Да?
Нет, я просто против коррупции в нашей стране.
Так против коррупции в нашей стране нужны методами другими, а не разлагать страну.
Это не разложение страны.
Конечно, нет. Когда люди высказывают свою позицию цивилизованно, не призывая на агрессию.
А никто не призывал на
А я сейчас
агрессию.
покажу вообще, больше ничего говорить не буду. Если ты не хочешь смотреть, закрой свой рот и отвернись. Но не мешай другим. Понял меня? Я не слышу ответа. Я не слышу ответа. Так, директор, марш отсюда. Марш отсюда к директору. Встал быстро. Ты зачем мешаешь смотреть фильм?
Я просто сказал...
А не надо просто, надо смотреть молча. Тебе нравится, когда с тобой так разговаривают? Я с тобой так разговариваю, получаю удовольствие. Отвернись и смотри молча.
Что вы меня сейчас тронули?
Чтобы принял какое-то решение. Либо не трогал, либо сидел спокойно. Ясно?
Sometimes I watch and I feel a little sorry for the teacher. You can kind of see her world crumbling around her to a certain degree. And the interesting thing about this video is that it was far from being the only one. A lot of students were posting similar videos of altercations that they were having with their teachers directly after these protests. So we were able to take a couple of them and put them online, and they're really quite successful. This one, for example, had more than 600,000 views on just one platform, Kontakte, and we typically distribute across a number of platforms, so it did quite well for us. So that's an example of a product where we are able to take content from inside Russia and re-deliver it back to that audience with great traction.
Thank you, Daisy. I don't know about others, that example almost gave me goosebumps listening to the amount of emotion that was there on both sides. And it really points to some of the dangers that journalists, whether they're citizen journalists, such as this student, or professional journalists face. And it's and even more difficult, obviously, to get information from outside the country, from international sources. So perhaps, Adina, you could share a few examples with us of the America-focused programming of Current Time.
Yes, hi. Very nice to be here. Thank you very much for IREX to initiate this very interesting discussion. I actually wanted to, if possible, to ask the technical team to play the clip that I have for the American-focused programming. Daisy gave you kind of an overview of the whole channel. We here in Washington are responsible for our daily live show, which is called Current Time America, very inventive title, Настоящее время Америка. And I just wanted to play this little clip that is the beginning of our show that ran on Friday. It is at 1 p.m. Washington time, so we are trying to do the latest by that time, whatever is happening, we try to give it to our viewers. So if we can play that clip, that'd be great.
Сверим часы по настоящему времени. Из студии в Вашингтоне вас приветствую я, Роман Мамонов. В ближайший час подробно о главных событиях дня, какими они видятся из США. Первый раз лицом к лицу за несколько минут до нашего эфира президенты США и России завершили двухчасовую встречу на полях саммита Большой Двадцатки в Гамбурге. Что обсуждали Дональд Трамп и Владимир Путин, и что думают эксперты. Двадцатка, добро пожаловать в ад. Антиглобалисты уже второй день устраивают акции протеста и беспорядки в Гамбурге. Десятки задержанных, водометы и сожженные машины. Последней информации из эпицентра событий, а также без объяснения причин ушел в отставку критиковавший Трампа глава Федерального управления по этике. В середине часа, как всегда, данные сбившие новости экономики от наших коллег в Нью-Йорке. Но начинаем с дайджеста новостей от Игоря Тихоненко.
Спасибо, Роман. Коротко о событиях в мире и в США. В Гамбурге в пятницу открылся двухдневный саммит Большой Двадцатки. Самое ожидаемое.
Okay, that's the beginning of the show. It starts at 1 p.m. We're trying to give the most important. That Friday, as you know, the meeting ended at 12:15, which was very, very good for us because we could actually bring some analysis, expert analysis into the show. But basically what we're trying to do is we're trying to give this American, first of all, news about America firsthand, unfiltered, and try to give the audiences, you know, the most current, most relevant, and of course truthful and objective information about United States, what's happening here, and the American perspective on the events happening in the target audience, which is Russia and countries where there's large Russian-speaking population. So the way we're doing it, we try to have as many as possible live reports. We have reporters regularly coming into the show. Again, we're trying to do as many lives as possible. The show is live and our reporters are live. We try to do, we have reporters from White House, State Department. If there are interesting, meaningful discussions in think tanks, we have reporters there who are trying to bring people in who can talk directly to the audience. We also try to send our reporters around the country, so we don't have just Washington. As you know, we are giving American perspective, which is representing all different views that exist, all different, populaces who, participate in this country, in civil society, in the politics, in creating this country daily, the way it is. So when we started doing this Current Time America show, we tried to expand into other cities and create, we call it little virtual bureaus. We have Florida, in Miami, Florida. We have a little virtual bureau in Los Angeles, San Francisco. We have big presence in New York. We're doing daily 15 minutes business show from New York, reporting from United Nations. We have a studio in New York Stock Exchange. Again, live reports on information that is relevant, accurate, truthful, objective. And we also do a Current Time Itogi, which is a 30-minute show that goes on air on the channel on Saturday, and this is a wrap-up of the week. We usually bring analysis or some newsmakers who can talk authoritatively about what's happening. This is our main focus of our show. And another point I wanted to make is that it's very important because a lot of media in Russia, and everyone who ever watches it or reads about it knows that, one of the points of that media is anti-American tilt. Like whatever is happening, it's given a certain context, it's twisted certain way. So whatever they talk about in Russian media talks about America all the time, but the way they present it, that's a different story. So I believe that our goal is to actually give the real portrait of what America is and what American society is. So this is our main product at this point. We, of course, as Voice of America, use that synergy that is created through this Current Time brand, and we use it on all platforms ourselves as well, in social media, on our website, repackaged and or adjusted for social media distribution, but this is our main product. Another thing we're doing along the same lines is we're producing a 26-episode documentary series that is called My American Dream. And the way we went about it, we decided that we want Russian-speaking people who come to America in pursuit of American dream to tell the story in their own words. So each episode is about 30 minutes episode where different people tell their stories. It's not narrated by a reporter or intermediary. It is told by people about themselves, and that would be, I hope, ready for distribution on the channel starting September. So anyway, we hope it will be interesting for everyone, for the channel, and for people who come to our platforms to see what Voice of America is all about. So I would like to show a little clip of this documentary series just to give you a little taste of what it's going to be, and we will continue doing documentaries that have characters in the middle of them that are interesting for our audiences. So if you could play it, it's very short.
Город меня вдохновил сильно, очень.
Меня сразу же по приезду поразила и поражает сейчас необыкновенная доброжелательность в людях.
Вот именно та атмосфера, в которой я себя чувствовала очень комфортно.
Было ощущение свободы.
было ощущение такое, что я откуда-то вырвался.
Как бы переезд полон стресса, с другой стороны, были какие-то, естественно, положительные моменты. Я тут вырос, и мне город этот знаком.
Я просто не могла поверить. Мне казалось, что я как будто в голливудском кино. И когда не могла подумать, что я в какой-то момент вдруг окажусь в Америке, и это будет мой дом.
Америка покорила меня своей природой. И у меня такая мысль в голове. Я хочу, чтобы мои дети experience, да, чтобы у них был доступ к этому, чтобы они вообще жили и учились именно там.
Okay, that's the clip, and that I will stop here, and if there are any questions later.
Thank you. If I may, I'd like to pose my first question to you, Irina. You showed us two very different clips, and I imagine that there is a massive information trying to cover a country as large as America. And also, many people have probably seen, there was a quote in The Guardian that EU officials estimate that Russia puts about $1 billion into its own Russian Today channel and also Sputnik channel. So that's an incredible amount of resources. Trying to counterbalance that, is there a particular type of programming that you found to be most effective?
Yes, actually, as I pointed out before, we're trying to do as much live programming as possible. And there's another, in addition to what we do that I just showed you, we also are developing now, I think, a very interesting approach to communicating directly with the audiences. We started doing live broadcasts of important events with simultaneous translation, and we go live with that on the channel and on our platforms. And example of that, I would say we did, for example, inauguration speech, or Comey testifying in Congress. We did 3 hours live that went on the channel, and it went on our Facebook page, it went on our website page, and it is a very it seems it's kind of a very simple and primitive concept, but it actually works very well because people nowadays, everyone talks about it in this situation where informational noise is so overwhelming and interpreters spin and twist content either each way, and it's really hard to figure out your way around that. When people get live, simultaneously translated events, they get this taste of information coming directly to them, because a lot of Russian-speaking people still, they speak Russian, they don't speak English. So what I went on our website and I looked at the latest live broadcast that we did, which was President Trump's speech in Warsaw. That went on the channel live. It was a special broadcast. And we had several comments. Of course, it's anecdotal evidence. It's not, statistical data, but I thought it would illustrate this response to this question very well. One of the comments was, this is not for those people who react aggressively to anything coming from America. We are here, it's one of the audience members, we're here to learn about news and learn how to be tolerant, and that we will learn from Americans, and how to defend your freedom. That's one comment. Another comment, wow, we would not see that on the Russian TV channels without cut out, and without interpretation. Thank you for this translation, for this broadcast. Third one, tomorrow Russian news will give us a totally different picture of what's happening. So it's great we're here, listening now. So anyway, that's just one of the examples. Everything we do, we try to kind of stand on this, credibility issue, true true objective information, upholding our credibility and doing as many live reporting as possible so that the people can see that it is coming to them unfiltered, unmitigated, direct, and, you know, take it from there, basically. That's one of them.
Thank you.
Instances.
That's an excellent example of how digital strategies in mass media can help us meet some of these new needs. My next question is for you, Lubov, in Kiev. In addition to looking at the evolving technology in the information system and things like digital media strategy, we've also found that it's important to look at history. And I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit about some of the lessons learned that you have from the Learn to Discern program of how one can reach disaffected citizens in a conflict-affected area such as Ukraine, one with a long history of intense politicized propaganda that has just become even more intensified in the last few years.
Yes, supply is critically important, but clearly the other side of the coin is building citizens' skills to recognize this information and demand better quality information. Having long history problems in Ukraine, and since Euromaidan, Ukraine was flooded with disinformation and propaganda. Citizens were really confused and they didn't know what to do, which news to believe, and which information, which events actually happened or not. So our project was really on time and very needed in Ukraine. When we started Learn to Discern program in Ukraine, we looked into existing media literacy curricular and media literacy programs which we had, because media literacy in Ukraine was developed around many years since our project. However, we found that existing media literacy curriculums didn't meet and didn't match the sophistication amount of the speed of propaganda and disinformation and fake news which we had at that time. Therefore, we developed an interactive and user-centered training curriculum tailored for different audiences based on their information and news consumption habits and needs, as our target beneficiaries were youth as well as adult and senior people. For example, training for pensioners, we focused more on newspapers and manipulation techniques that happen in newspapers, as they are the highest consumers of newspapers. Trainings for youth and young adults, we were focusing on online media and social networks, because oftentimes in online media people use aggregators without necessary understanding from where this news is aggregated. Or manipulation happens in headlines, and often online people skim through the headlines without necessarily reading the entire article and comparing whether headline and article match. And having this disinformation already, they start telling to other people what they read or heard, and that new role of misinformation was coming. In addition to carefully tailoring content for target audiences, we also understood that it is very important to choose the right trainers to deliver the materials. Understanding the complexity of disinformation in Ukraine, IREX's Learn to Discern model selected trusted community members to train peers on critical information skills that helped them to sort misinformation and propaganda from fact-based balanced reporting. Given its long history of propaganda and deep public distrust, word of mouth is considered as a source of reliable information, and every community has informal influential leaders whose opinions shapes that of the others around them.
Thank you, Luba. It's interesting as an NGO implementer to think about the perennial question of when you're offering this sort of skills training, how do you get people to come in to attend? So it's important to also have complementary approaches that can reach those who wouldn't necessarily have time or inclination. And Daisy, you had mentioned that Current Time has such a program on media literacy. Could you tell us a bit about that, please?
Sure, I would love to. It's actually one of the programs that we really like the most and consider quite successful. It's called Смотри в оба, which we translate loosely as see both sides. And we also refer to it as footage versus footage because that is literally what it is. It emanated from a digital product where we would put Russian news coverage of a certain event next to Ukrainian coverage of the same event just to see how they compared to each other. And the journalist who hosts the program is named Andrei Cherkasov, and he's very experienced. He comes from NTV in its independent days in the 90s, but also worked at Channel 1, which is the largest watched Russian state-run channel. So he has a keen understanding of how the propaganda machine actually works. And he's also worked as a foreign correspondent in London, Paris, and DC. And I say that mainly by way of explaining that he has a really sharp interest not only in how Russian media functions, but how media functions everywhere. And one of the things that we really like about this show in particular is that it's not only taking casting a stern eye at Russian media and saying this is bad and everything else is wonderful. No, he actually really takes a deep look at how media functions with all its foibles in a lot of different parts of the world. The example that I want to show you just now is a piece that looks at how Russian media functions in its near abroad to advance the Kremlin's foreign policy. So in this particular example, we're going to be looking at Moldova, where many television channels are Russian channels and state-run, and really make clear what the Kremlin's policy on Moldova is as Moldova struggles with its East-West kind of self-identity crisis. So let's take a look.
Чье именно информационное влияние будто бы угрожает Молдове? Об этом в законопроекте ни слова, но его авторы, да и местные СМИ говорят прямо. Дело в России и в новостных программах, направленных против Запада и европейских устремлений Кишинева.
Молдова семимильными шагами мчится в Евросоюз. Ее, правда, туда пока не берут.
Вместо обещанных Евросоюзом молочных рек и кисельных берегов Молдавия получила отток инвестиций, русофобское правительство и спад экономики.
На востоке Россия, которая себя не навязывает, но всегда гостеприимна. Там, где садится закатное солнце, Европа.
Молдавскую тему в российских новостях поднимают не очень часто, к визиту президента или очередному торговому эмбарго. Но все месседжи транслируют местные филиалы российских каналов.
Стараниями Запада Молдова лишилась промышленности, сельского хозяйства, стала самой бедной страной Европы.
Подобные материалы считают в Демократической партии Молдовы не что иное, как пропаганда. Запретить предлагают все информационные и аналитические передачи, произведенные в странах, не ратифицировавших Европейскую конвенцию о трансграничном вещании. Формулировка длинная, подразумевает Россию.
Вот эти телеканалы – это настоящие российские танки, других не нужно.
Они формируют нам общественное мнение, они нам внушают, кого любить, кого ненавидеть. Это уже информационный терроризм.
Российская Федерация проводит такую политику медийную, манипулятивного характера. Тут и деньги большие, тут и профессионалы, которые хорошо работают.
Я лично полностью это поддерживаю, считаю, что это давно надо, потому что у нас есть пример Украины, где эта пропаганда носит уже какой-то информационно-террористический характер.
У противников запрета множество претензий. Говорят, что это цензура, что лидер демократов, медиамагнат Владимир Плохотнюк хочет избавиться от конкурентов и неприятных для него новостей. Таким образом, правительство пытается выслужиться перед Западом. Недаром, мол, отчет о пропаганде подготовлен на деньги американского посольства.
Это борьба с ветряными мельницами.
Не является ли это дымовой завесой?
Призвано отвлечь внимание граждан от проблем в обществе.
Общественности становятся понятны истинные цели авторов законопроекта.
Они хотят
хотят понравиться кое-кому на Западе.
Убедить Запад, что они будут иметь в их лице надежного здесь партнера.
А что, разве нет пропаганды со стороны Румынии в Молдове? Что нет разве пропаганды со стороны Евросоюза в Молдове?
Категорически против ограничений выступает и президент Молдовы, социалист Игорь Додон, старающийся наладить отношения с Москвой и находящийся в оппозиции к правительству собственной страны. Он пообещал, что будет препятствовать принятию закона всеми возможными методами.
So that was one segment of a half-hour show, and so other segments included looking at how the French press has changed its relationship with Macron now that he's been elected. Another segment looked at how the Russian press and the American press differed in their coverage of Oliver Stone's movie on Putin, and the Russian press was full of praise, and the American press less so. So it really is a nice trip around the world with each program, and it really gives people an opportunity to learn more about how the media works, not only in their countries, but around the world.
Thank you. We had hoped at this point to turn over to audience Q&A, but if you will bear with me, I'd like to exercise the moderator's prerogative to ask 2 more quick questions so that we can get a little bit more sense of the impact of some of this programming. Luba, I imagine that the sort of clip that we just saw, which comes from Moldova, is actually very familiar, and I know that the Learn to Discern curriculum has similar examples from Ukraine. Can you give us a sense of how you know that the training participants are actually applying the skills that they learned through the in-person or online training?
We succeeded in Ukraine and gained citizens' trust by ensuring that we did not tell people what news to consume, but rather how to consume, so that they are shielded from manipulation. We know that LTD worked because critical thinking skills coupled with practical hands-on tools to separate information from propaganda are effective, as there was a number of training participants who almost always check and cross-check the information, and these numbers are doubled over 3 months period. Informed media consumption habits are contagious. 91% of training participants shared with their news skills with at least 6 other people, reaching more than 80,000 people, and that were their friends, relatives, colleagues at work. And we even had a lot of quotes from participants later sharing with us and telling that how they protected their family members or friends from getting into the trap of propaganda and manipulations. Even brief exposure to the concept of informed media consumption raises awareness and motivation to gain skills that help to discern untruthful reporting. Skills uptake actually increased over time. We had our surveys before the training, after the training, and also 3 months after all trainings finished. And we saw the dynamics that 82% of training participants noted that they started, 82% of participants at the beginning of the training, they told that, yes, we will be checking information and we will cross-check sources of information. But later, on the 3 months later survey, 92% of people reported that they actually do that, and this number grew, that people were more interested to use skills they received during the trainings. The trainings itself has also a lot of stages of transformation, especially for those people who came for the first time on such training and considered themselves very knowledgeable. And at the beginning they were telling that they know everything, what new you can learn to us. And after passing half of the training, people were more confused and telling what to do now and whom should we believe now. And at the end of the training, they were more confident in their skills and ability to check the information and to understand where is propaganda and manipulations. So all these positive feedbacks and results which we received make us even more confident in success of the project, because that are real examples. And what is more important, we have many trainers whom we trained. They continue now, even though the project is over, they continue to use these skills and to share the information. They conduct trainings to other people whom they didn't reach yet. And some of participants, they even got their small mini grants to continue media literacy trainings in villages to reach more people, because these knowledges and skills are very important still in Ukraine.
Thank you, Luba. Those are very good examples, and I encourage people to ask more questions if they have them. But quickly, before we get to that, I'd like to hear, if possible, a little bit about how Current Time is also gathering data to measure the impact, so that you're able to judge and then decide, of course, for future programming what's working best.
Okay, well, I do want to repeat that Current Time is a pretty young channel, so in terms of hard data, it's still early days for us. We don't yet have regular access to audience research, although in the coming months we will. So that's going to change a lot about what we know about who's watching us. What we do know so far is that we have a measured TV audience of about 2.4 million people across our entire broadcast area. Of that, 1.3 are coming from inside Russia. So even though we are barred from traditional distribution for the most part within Russia, it still represents our largest numerical audience, simply because Russia is such a huge country. It's followed by Kazakhstan and Ukraine, then Moldova and Lithuania, Tajikistan. We know that our audience is predominantly male and urban. But in the short term, what we're really looking for are examples of impact that are more anecdotal, where we're really showing that we're creating thinking, engagement, action on the ground. And of course, that's especially important when it comes to a country like Russia. So if you'll permit me, I want to show one more video, and I'll introduce it very briefly. We have a program called Unknown Russia, which is done by a single two-person crew, a wonderful journalist named Vadim Kondakov, who finds deeply human, interesting stories throughout all of Russia, often in very remote parts of the country. And a few months ago, he profiled a town called Brusinovo, which is mainly populated by people who are legally blind. And it's been the city was created for blind inhabitants in the wake of World War II, when many veterans were returning home. And the idea was to give them a place where they could all be employed in a single factory that was built with infrastructure for them. So it's a nice idea in principle. It's now many decades later, and the town has fallen on hard times, and many of these people are living really in very dangerous and unpleasant conditions. And so a piece focused on one person in particular, a man named Sergei Ivanov, who was living in a communal flat that had holes in the floor and cockroaches on the wall. He had a very abusive neighbor. In short, it was a deeply unsafe place for a blind person to be living. And the piece was promoted heavily on social media and really landed in the right spot with the Russian audience, so that people got very interested in his case. A charity got involved and raised over $26,000 that was used to find him a new place to live. And perhaps more importantly, it paid for longer-term changes, not only for him, but everyone living in this town, so that the factory where they had been working was given new projects and new infrastructure that allowed them to be a little more industrious, more productive, more profitable. And it created what we're always looking for, a little bit of legislative action. So the governor of the region went and met this man personally and promised some reforms. We'll see. So for us, that was really a remarkable achievement, and it was done through a series of not only this original 30-minute documentary, but then a lot of social videos and smaller packages that reach a wide audience very quickly. So I just quickly want to show you a video that sort of, this is at the very tail end of all of this, that kind of wraps up the whole story.
Прошли там? работу я делаю мало, конечно. Вот. А работник я не знаю, как назвать, плохой.
Почему вы говорите, что вы плохой работник?
Ну, то, что я мало делаю, я не выполняю норму. Вот, пипеток делаю только 1000. В этом плане как бы. Употребляет он водочку, если кто-то придет, принесет, он не откажется. Начинает кидаться, швыряться, за мной ползать. Мне я открываю двери, прям кричу на лестницу, чтобы люди мне помогли. Я как бы почувствую, что...
Ну, вперед. Хозяин. Эта история, она твою жизнь как-то поменяла, изменила?
Да, изменила. Мне захотелось жить, не захотелось смерти, как сказать. Вот теперь, да, захотелось жить, что что-то будет дальше это лучше.
Сереж, здесь стол. Подожди. Дай мне. Ты проходишь вдоль стены, то есть дверь, она находится в дальней стороне комнаты. Вот вход в спальню. Ну вот, здесь есть комод, шкаф. Вот шкаф. Нет, это не шкаф.
One thing I didn't mention is that this story was also, after it ran on Current Time, it was picked up by a number of Western media outlets and perhaps more importantly by Russian media outlets. The story really took off. So for us, that was really a trifecta. It got a lot of media attention. It got government action on the part of the local governor going to speak to this man face to face, and of course, a real qualitative change of life for this gentleman. So for us, that's the kind of anecdotal impact that we're always seeking with Current Time.
Thank you. I think it's fair to say that IREX and RFE and VOA all share the conviction that access to information, to quality, reliable information, is actually key to helping people improve their lives and that of their communities. And that connection to engagement is what it's all about. So with that, thank you to all three of you. I'd like to open it up for questions and answers. And we do actually have the room beyond 11 o'clock, so please feel free to stay beyond the advertised ending time of 11. We have a mic somewhere. Who has the mic? There's a question over here and another in the far corner. And also I'll remind you, you can tweet questions if you like, if you're an online viewer or someone here who's more shy, to @BBGGOV.
Thank you very much. Fascinating presentation. It's having been involved in this work, it's so interesting to be updated on how it's going. My question, though, is not because I used to work in this area, but is more like the kind of question a journalist might ask, which is what I used to be. Because I think there's an elephant in the room, and I'd be interested in hearing you, perhaps each of you, talk about it a little bit. President Trump's attacks on the US media, his description of the New York Times, the Washington Post, CNN, as fake news. What kind of impact does this, first of all, how do you, Irina, cover this kind of controversy for the Russian audience? And secondly, what kind of impact do you think this disputatious environment between our current president and the American news media is having on the ability of programs from IREX or from the BBG to have an impact in the Russian audience? Thanks.
Thank you.
Well, you know better than I do that VOA Charter tells us that we, as Voice of America, we do not tote government line or anything like that. We are trying to present the whole society with all its diversity with various views, opinions, and positions. So, it's tough because we're also media, but what we're trying to do is to tell it like it is. We report on what's been said, what's been said by administration. We report on how that was interpreted by administration's representatives, how it was explained or developed or backtracked. We report on what people who have different opinions have. And for example, we cover a lot of protests that are going on all around the country, but each protest has a counter-protest that meets them somewhere in the middle. So we cover both. We cover protests and anti-protests, and we try to give us, because that's what this society is different from Russia. Everyone has a right to express their opinions in a peaceful way, organize if they don't like something, and so forth. It's what it is, and we're trying to keep calm and reasonable position in covering everything that's going on. That's my response to this question. I don't know, Daisy, if you...
Well, I'll just add, it's back in the day, I think both RFE and VOA had pieces that they did that were called Democratic Experience, and it basically was breaking down how American government works for the benefit of their audiences. And the interesting thing about President Trump and the opportunity he presents us with, or challenge, is that it gives us a fresh opportunity to explore how American institutions work. So it's not only what he says, it's the processes that follow as a result. And so it is a daily challenge, but a very interesting one. But we have to redouble our efforts to be very careful about how we're reporting about events in the United States, and be very clear that what remains a critical difference is that it's not just one person's word, that there's a series of institutions and checks and balances that follow in the wake of comments like his.
I think our audiences, for example, always react. I can't say for sure, but we get a lot of responses that, for example, the president issues some, order, and then there are some institutions that stand against it and block it and whatnot. I mean, for Russian audiences, it sounds very strange, like they have a different vertical hierarchy where, for whatever comes from the top is then supported in the middle, and then it's, fed to the people as, this is what you do. And here, as Daisy said, it's great that she mentioned that. Yes, indeed, we cover the fact that, there are checks and balances. There are different branches of government, and they are hopefully balancing each other out and look out for American people, for the good of the American people. So we try to do that, as much as possible.
Thank you. There was a question in the back corner here. And then I think you had a question, and you did, yes? Way in the back.
Hi, thanks very much for this program. I'm Kathy Kiley with the National Press Club Journalism Institute, and my question's kind of a follow-up to the first one, and that is, I feel like perhaps unfortunately we have a lot to learn from your Ukrainian panelist, and I wondered if we could get a little more information about how the program was set up, or how the trainers were selected, and to maximize your impact.
Thank you. Luba, were you able to hear the question?
Yes. Thank you for the question. Indeed, all the technical and administrative information was really interesting, and it was hard to find and focus really on the launching the program, because it was, we tried to do something what no one was doing before us in Ukraine. So First, we developed the curriculum, and what was special and unique in this curriculum, we tried to focus on our end users. We tried to understand who will come on our trainings, who will be these end users, and what skills and knowledge they need. So this is what is related to the training program. Selection of trainers, first we selected master trainers, those highly qualified trainers who have experience in conducting trainings for trainers, who have experience in conducting complicated trainings, meaning with diverse audiences and with people having different opinions and maybe having conflict situations. And also we looked for trainers who had at least basic understanding and knowledge on media literacy. Second round of trainers whom we were selecting, it was citizen trainers. It was those trainers who maybe never were trainers on media literacy, and some of them even were not trainers before, but they knew what is trainings. They were highly motivated to learn, and they were highly motivated to share knowledges they received. So these trainers, we gathered 428 trainers in 14 regions of Ukraine. Basically, it's 30 trainers per each region. And how we selected these trainers, we had a public call, and this advertisement was also developed in a way to explain future trainers what their tasks will be, what the program will be about, and to check their motivation. And upon checking the motivation and applications, we selected these 428 trainers whom we later trained. However, we received more applications, and we received even applications from those citizens who wanted to become trainers, but they were not from our target regions. It was showing high interest and need in such trainings, even in western part of Ukraine and central parts of Ukraine, which were not, unfortunately, included in our program. And that is basically it about the selection of trainers and trainings. First, we conducted training for master trainings to present the program, to practice it, and to show and to check if everything works and if everything is relevant in the program. After this testing and modifying a little bit our program, we launched it in regions, and we conducted 2-day trainings for trainers in each of regions, training 428 trainers, who after that conducted their own trainings and spread the information. In such a way, we were able, in short period of times, basically it was 2-3 months, our trainers had to perform their trainings, and they managed to reach over 15,000 people, just ordinary citizens covering different age groups and different working professions.
Thank you, Luba. There was a question over here, please, in the front row, and then in the middle in the second row.
Thank you. Matthew Wallen, American Security Project. My question is partially related to metrics, but more on the types of issues that you're finding trouble with dealing with. Are there particular bits of information, or disinformation, I should say, or particular narratives that you're finding that you're not actually being effective with, that are sticking, whether that's conspiracy theory or whatever it might be, that's actually causing problems for your efforts? And if so, are there particular resources that you need that you don't have in order to address those particular bits of disinformation?
I can't think of a specific example of disinformation where we have had a problem with it, but certainly our biggest problem is just access to the Russian market and the ability to work freely there. We do have a team of journalists who are fortunately working not only in Moscow and St. Petersburg, but throughout the entire country. But they are working completely without the protection of accreditation, and that means that they are vulnerable to pressure, to abuse. But on a day-to-day basis, they're simply barred entry to even the most kind of perfunctory events. So for us, the biggest challenge is always, how do we get information on the ground in Russia? And frankly, not only there. The worst situation is, of course, there, but it's a challenge that we face in all of the countries where we operate.
Yeah, I also wanted to, if a technical team could show that one picture. I don't know if you could find it. Yeah? I just wanted to say that we this is a picture, I just thought you guys would enjoy it because it has everyone IREX as well. You know that Russian legislature recently has been conducting a series of hearings into international broadcaster work in Russia. And that I'm building on what Daisy said. She has like issues on the ground. We had less people, we only have maybe a couple of stringers in Russia. But what I'm saying is, this is one of the illustrations in Russian Duma, in one of the committees, I believe. Don't quote me, I don't know, but this is one of those schemes that show what, in Russian opinion, happening here and who is sponsoring what and to what end. Basically, all those, you know, State Department, CIA, and all that, kind of feeding international broadcasters and all those NGOs to undermine, you know, Russia's sovereignty, integrity, whatever. I didn't bring another one. Another one was very recent, like a month ago. They just had 3, that was more professional done it. It had 3 big bricks on top, which was Voice of America, Radio Svoboda, Current Time. And that was like also the topic of discussion. So basically, one of the narratives that Russian government through Russian media is pushing is that, you know, we all are a hand of, you know, State Department, which goal is to undermine Russia and bring it down, basically, pull it apart and, you know, destroy it. That's you know, they spend a lot of money on that narrative. You know, Russia Today, Sputnik started recently in Washington on FM, English station. Some people don't even know what it is because they're just listening to it. It's an information, English language information radio program that goes, I think it was a bluegrass station or something. So it's a lot of money, a lot of resources, and a lot of Russian television showed series of documentaries about tracing it back to, I don't know, Second World War. I don't know if you saw that. That was very involved in terms of CIA, you know, pushing Russia down, and I think that narrative is supported by the whole, you know, might of Russian state, and it's a hard narrative to deal with because, you know, when people dismiss you as somebody who is just a propaganda, you know, tool aimed at undermining Russia, foreign agent and all that, that's a hard one to deal with.
It's going to be a challenging year for our projects like ours, for sure, because there are, of course, presidential elections in Russia in the spring. And lawmakers in Russia have already proposed legislation that aims to silence foreign media voices like ours, like CNN, with the idea that we are going to be seeking to influence the outcome of the elections, which is a sweet irony. And so, yeah, if there is a big challenge, it's in our ability to control our own message about ourselves within Russia. There was shortly after our official launch in February, a report came out from Dmitry Kiselyov, who of course is the main sort of mouthpiece of the Kremlin, and that was had nothing good to say about current time, and basically I think he referred to us as a money laundering operation in the guise of fighting Russian propaganda. But the good news was that he mentioned our website address in his piece, and we got a lot of traffic.
Yeah, negative publicity is publicity.
If I could just add to wrap this up, IREX's Center for Applied Learning Impact has been doing some research looking in particular at ways that adults learn media skills and critical information consumption skills and how that leads to behavioral change. And I would say that one of the greatest issues is not a particular narrative that changes on a daily or weekly basis, but the narrative that you can't believe anything. Because that leads then to public apathy and disengagement. And at that point, no matter how much content and training you provide, it's difficult to get people to come back and to believe. So I would focus on that in particular, and there's been a lot of good research on that as well. Next question, I believe, was in the middle of the front row.
Hi, sorry, my name is Rowan Rockefeller, and I'm with the BBG. I guess my question is primarily aimed at Ms. Veselchuk, although please feel free to weigh in if you guys have anything to say. But I was wondering how L2D specifically deals with the topic of censorship and with particular regards to the recent Ukrainian ban on Russian media. Do you face pushback from any of your alumni and participants on that topic, and how do you deal with that?
Thank you. Luba, did you catch the question?
Yes. In our trainings, we focused more on fighting propaganda and disinformation and manipulations. However, we also covered the topic of censorship, but more in the meaning to explain that this issue exists and people should be aware on that, and not much focusing on that. And since our most of our trainings and activities were conducted before all the Russian TV channels were banned officially and finally, we didn't hear much from our trainers about it, and actually there was no much negative influence and much negative feedback that Russian TV channels were banned, because those who were willing to track and to see Russian TV news, they could check it online in the internet. So that was just the issue of willingness to continue following news or not, and I wouldn't say that there was some kind of problem in this.
Thank you. Any other questions? One here? Oh, in the back and then on the right.
Kathy Kosman, thank you so much for this session. And of course, countering current disinformation is a big task, but I was wondering whether you also pay any attention to filling in lacunae, so to speak, of Soviet history. I know footage that's never been shown of interviews with Soviet dissidents, for example.
Good question. I can just start. VOA produced, with the help of many, we participated in this production and we had like editorial control, but the whole, again, the 36 episodes of the Soviet dissident series, it's a very thorough study of Russian Soviet dissident movement, and it's hosted by a famous journalist in Russia, Natalia Boltyansky. She narrates it, and she spoke with basically everyone who is still with us and brought up a lot of archival footage and all that, and it's 36 30-minute episodes or 15-minute episodes. I forgot that, but 36 episodes, and I know we had it, we ran it on our website. VOA dubbed it into English. It also went on the current channel website, so that we really pay attention to that. That's a very important topic. But I know that, you know, Radio Svoboda and Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty and Current Time, every time, you know, something like that is available, we always, you know, bring it up, basically. That's my short answer.
Thank you. And there was a question over here.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. That's been great. I don't have to tell you guys that like Eurasia is an area that has had a lot of deep ethnic divides over its history. How do you stay above kind of getting written off as just another biased propaganda source? How do you stay above the fray in propaganda?
Thank you.
It's a very interesting question, and it's one that we struggle with a lot in terms of how do we present ourselves? We are a U.S. government-funded organization. How do we present ourselves as something that is not shaped directly by the U.S. administration? And what we say and what we've said all along, and this is true with Radio Free Europe and VOA, is look at the work. We are legitimate media organizations with a distinct firewall that separates us editorially from the U.S. government, and we work extremely hard to be objective, fact-based journalists in all things. And of course, covering a region like the one that Current Time covers, it's very difficult. You are constantly dealing with perceptions about what a US-funded media organization is going to say about one particular region or another, not to mention what all of these regions are saying about themselves. So it's something that you can't wave a magic wand and say, we come in peace and you can trust us. No, it's really day in, day out, difficult work.
I wanted to start with that too. Like, you do daily work, you put out, as much as possible of coverage. We work, on all platforms. I just wanted to say that Voice of America, as well as Current Time, very active on social media, and nowadays we can say that when people share what you put out, it means, for us at least, we think that it means that they find us credible, because you don't just look at it and like it, you share it, so you kind of have a stake into what you're sharing. Some months, some weeks we had like 700,000 shares on our Facebook page. So I know that numbers are all over the place, and people come up with all kinds of numbers, but I'm just thinking that shareability is very important, and we think that just daily grind, you work and you do what you can, and you bring as much as possible of your understanding of truthfulness and fact-based journalism, and I think people will end up seeing it. And the fact that there are a lot of huge audiences, we had millions of views. Current Time, their social department is very, very successful as well, and people share, people kind of organize around that. I think that's the only way you can do it. You just have to put your best foot forward, stick with your charter, stick with your journalistic principles, and do your work. And that's the only suggestion I have.
I think it's also time for a shout out for local independent media. They do still exist, they're under threat, but it's also very important to work in partnership with them, and that's one way that IREX would help to work above those divides. So for example, in Moldova, there's Gagauz language, Romanian language, Russian language, print, TV, radio, and helping those organizations both develop their professional journalistic skills, but also develop sustainable business models is another way to make sure that independent voices are getting out, in addition to the great work coming from the BBG. Any other questions? Any questions from our Twitter friends?
Clearly compelling content. Do you have enough resources to promote it and grow audience? Is growing audience important?
Thank you.
Well,
Yes.
we would. Someone wants to give us more money, we would not refuse. Clearly, growing our audience is important. We're talking about just 2.4 million people in terms of a measured audience right now in a huge region. So yes, growing our audience is extremely important. And we even talk about eventually reaching all of the 275 million Russian speakers worldwide. So yes, that's something that we think about all the time. Resources, no, there will never be enough. We are a very scrappy organization, and when I hear about $1 billion for RT and Sputnik, I get a little lump in my throat. But we feel that we do have the support of congressional backers, and we do feel that Current Time is a project that's in for the long run. We expect to be here for many years to come.
I second that.
One more question here in the corner, please. Microphone is making its way to you.
Do you work with local radio programs, like in Ukraine, the popular Hromadske Radio, which now is broadcasting both in Ukrainian and in Russian, and is basically a community organization? And are there other such radio programs or TV programs? They've expanded, I understand.
We do work with Hromadske TV. One show that we do that looks at business startups in Ukraine and elsewhere is called Business Plan, and that is a joint project that we do directly with Hromadske TV. And in fact, that's a big part of our model at Current Time, in part because of our resource issues, but also in part of the fact that we want to encourage local journalism in the countries where we work, as we try to strike up as many partnerships with independent media organizations as we can. So we have a number of shows that are joint productions with local groups like Hromadske.
IREX also runs a program called the US-Ukraine Media Partnership Program that brings together Ukrainian TV and radio stations with American counterparts. And it does a sort of transatlantic skills exchange, sometimes bringing them to the Ukrainian visitors to the States and sometimes sending American journalists, editors, and station managers over to Ukraine. So that is something for something like the past 15 years we've been working on, and it's vitally important. Thank you for raising that. Last call for questions. I realize we've gone over time, and I appreciate your patience with us. I hope it was because of the scintillating conversation. I know that we haven't come up with any answers today, but it's good to know that there are so many people concerned about this and hopefully working together with us, supporting our work and working on it yourselves through your own organizations and research. Thank you very much for joining us today.